The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets of Oakland as David pulled his black Tesla into a parking spot outside Rosa's bakery. At 52, he had built one of the world's largest software companies from nothing, turning a college dorm room idea into a $3 billion empire. But despite all his success, David still preferred simple meetings in neighborhood spots over fancy corporate boardrooms. Today was different, though. He was here to meet with local community leaders about his foundation's new program to help struggling families. The irony wasn't lost on him, a man who could buy entire city blocks was about to discuss poverty in a small bakery that probably made more money in a month than he spent on lunch. As David stepped out of his car, the familiar scent of fresh bread and coffee hit him. It reminded him of his childhood, when his parents had run a small grocery store and every penny mattered. Those memories never left him, even as his bank account grew beyond what most people could imagine. The bakery looked exactly like the kind of place his mother would have loved: warm brick walls, hand-painted signs, and windows that actually opened instead of being sealed shut like modern buildings. Rosa's bakery had been serving this neighborhood for over 30 years, and it showed in every worn corner and faded photograph on the walls. David was checking his phone for the time when he heard voices coming from inside the bakery. Not the usual chatter of customers, but something different. Something that made him pause and listen. "Please, Mr. Rodriguez," a small voice pleaded. "Just one loaf today. Mama promised she'd pay you back on Friday when she gets her money." David found himself moving closer to the large window, not to spy, but because something about that voice tugged at his heart. Through the glass, he could see two little girls standing at the counter. They couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, identical twins with dark hair pulled back in simple ponytails. Their clothes were clean but clearly hand-me-downs, and their backpacks looked like they'd seen better days. The man behind the counter, Mr. Rodriguez, apparently was an older gentleman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. David could see the conflict written all over his face as he looked down at the two girls. "Mia," Mr. Rodriguez said gently, using the Spanish term of endearment that David recognized from his own neighborhood growing up. "I know your mama is good for it. She always pays what she owes. But I have bills too, and the landlord doesn't accept promises." The first twin, the one who had spoken, bit her lip. "We haven't eaten since yesterday morning," she whispered. "Mama gave us her last piece of toast before she went to work." David felt his chest tighten. He'd heard statistics about childhood hunger, had written checks to food banks, but seeing it up close was different. These weren't numbers on a report. These were real children with empty stomachs and worried faces. The second twin, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "What if we help you today?" she offered. "We could sweep the floor or clean the windows. Would that be enough for just a small loaf?" Mr. Rodriguez's expression softened even more. "Oh, niñas," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You shouldn't have to work for food. You should be playing, going to school, being kids." David watched as the baker looked around his shop, clearly wrestling with his decision. The morning rush had ended, and only a few customers browsed the shelves. Business didn't look particularly busy. "I tell you what," Mr. Rodriguez finally said, "take this loaf." He reached for a smaller bread from the display. "But this is the last time I can do this without payment. I have my own family to think about." The twins' faces lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez," they said in unison. "Thank you so much." As they turned to leave, David got a better look at their faces. Despite their obvious hunger and worry, they both smiled, genuine, bright smiles that spoke of resilience and hope. They clutched the bread like it was treasure, which David realized it probably was to them. He watched them walk past his car, their heads bent together in conversation. They were clearly sisters, but David could see the subtle differences that marked them as individuals. One was slightly taller, more outspoken. The other seemed quieter, more observant. But both carried themselves with a dignity that impressed him. David found himself following them with his eyes as they headed down the street. They didn't run like most kids would with food in their hands. Instead, they walked carefully, protectively, as if they were carrying something precious that couldn't be damaged. Something about the scene stayed with David as he entered the bakery. The bells above the door chimed softly, and Mr. Rodriguez looked up from wiping down his counter. "Good morning," the baker said with a warm smile. "What can I get for you today?" David looked around the shop, taking in details he'd missed from outside. The cases were full of beautiful breads and pastries, but he noticed the prices were lower than what he'd expect in other parts of the city. This wasn't a trendy artisan bakery charging premium prices. This was a neighborhood institution serving working families. "Just coffee for now," David said. "I'm waiting for some people." As Mr. Rodriguez poured the coffee, David couldn't help but ask, "Those little girls who just left, they come in often?" The baker's face grew serious. "Too often, asking for credit," he admitted. "Their mother works 2 jobs, but it's still not enough. Good woman, very proud. She always pays what she owes, but sometimes it takes a while." David nodded, sipping his coffee. It was excellent, rich and smooth, clearly made with care. "Must be hard, deciding when to extend credit and when to say no. Hardest part of this job," Mr. Rodriguez agreed. "These families, they're not looking for handouts. They're working, trying their best. But sometimes their best isn't quite enough to make ends meet." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of David's meeting companions, 3 community leaders who had been working with his foundation. As they discussed plans for the new family assistance program, David found his mind wandering back to the twin girls and their quiet desperation. After the meeting ended and everyone had left, David lingered in the bakery. Mr. Rodriguez was preparing for the lunch rush, kneading dough and checking his ovens. "Those girls," David said suddenly, "what's their story?" Mr. Rodriguez paused in his work. "Luna and Stella," he said, "twin sisters, 8 years old. Their mother Carmen works as a cleaning lady at the hospital. She's been trying to go to school at night to become a nurse, but money is tight." David felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he'd had as a young man when he decided to start his company, the same drive that had pushed him to succeed. But this was different. This wasn't about building something for himself. This was about fixing something that was broken. "Their father?" David asked. "Gone," Mr. Rodriguez said simply. "Left about 2 years ago. Carmen's been raising them alone ever since." As David walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the image of those 2 little girls, holding their bread like it was the most precious thing in the world. He'd built his fortune on the belief that everyone deserved a chance to succeed, but here were 2 children who might never get that chance simply because they were born into circumstances beyond their control. He sat in his car for a long moment, thinking. Writing a check would be easy. But David had learned that the easy solution wasn't always the best one. Real change required more than money. It required understanding, planning, and most importantly, respect for the people you were trying to help. As he started his car and pulled away from the bakery, David made a decision. He was going to learn everything he could about Luna and Stella and their mother. Not to judge, but to understand. Not to pity, but to help in a way that would make a real difference. The billionaire who had everything was about to discover that sometimes the most valuable investments couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. David couldn't stop thinking about Luna and Stella as he drove home that evening. Their faces kept appearing in his mind, the way they had handled that bread so carefully, the quiet dignity in their voices when they offered to work for food. He'd built his entire career on solving problems, but this felt different. This wasn't about coding or business strategies. This was about real people living real struggles just a few miles from his comfortable home. The next morning, David found himself driving back to the same neighborhood. He told himself he was just curious, but deep down he knew it was more than that. He parked his car a block away from the bakery and walked slowly down the street, observing the community with fresh eyes. The area was working class, with small apartment buildings and family-owned shops. People walked to work or waited. At bus stops, many carrying lunchboxes and wearing uniforms. It reminded David of his own childhood neighborhood, where everyone knew everyone else's business and looked out for each other. He spotted the twins walking hand in hand toward the elementary school about 2 blocks away. They moved with purpose, their matching backpacks bouncing slightly with each step. David kept his distance, not wanting to seem like he was following them, but curious about their daily routine. At the school, he watched from across the street as they joined other children in the playground. Despite their obvious financial struggles, Luna and Stella seemed to fit in well with their classmates. They laughed and played, looking like any other kids their age. But David noticed they didn't have the snacks or juice boxes that other children pulled from their backpacks during recess. After school, David positioned himself at a coffee shop with a clear view of the street. He watched as the twins emerged from the building and began their walk home. Instead of heading straight back, they made several stops along the way. First, they visited Mrs. Chun at the corner grocery store. Through the window, David could see them helping the elderly woman stack cans on shelves. She handed them each a small bag of something, probably crackers or fruit, and patted their heads affectionately. Next, they stopped at Mr. Garcia's auto repair shop. The girls swept the entrance and organized some tools while the mechanic worked under the hood of an old sedan. Again, they were rewarded with what looked like a small snack and warm smiles. David began to understand. These children weren't just walking home from school. They were working their way through the neighborhood, earning small meals and treats by helping local business owners. It was both heartwarming and heartbreaking to watch. The twins' final stop was at Riverside Apartments, a 3-story building that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, and some of the windows were covered with cardboard instead of glass. But the small garden in front was well maintained, and children's toys scattered around the entrance suggested it was home to several young families. David watched the girls disappear into the building, then sat in his car for a long moment. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Rebecca. "I need you to do some research for me," he said. "But I need it done quietly and respectfully. No invasive background checks, nothing that would make anyone uncomfortable, just basic public information." Rebecca, who had worked with David for over 10 years, knew better than to ask too many questions when he got that tone in his voice. "What do you need to know?" "There's a family in Oakland. Mother named Carmen, twin daughters Luna and Stella. They live at Riverside Apartments. I want to know about their situation, but I want the information gathered through legitimate channels. Only school records that are public, hospital employment information, that sort of thing." "I'll be careful," Rebecca assured him. "Should I ask why you're interested?" David smiled. Rebecca always cut straight to the point. "Let's just say I'm considering an investment in the community." 3 days later, Rebecca handed David a folder. "The information you requested," she said. "And David, I hope you're planning something good for this family. Their story is tough." David opened the folder and began reading. Carmen Rodriguez worked as a night shift cleaner at Oakland General Hospital. She'd been there for 3 years, with perfect attendance and excellent reviews from her supervisors. Before that, she'd worked at a nursing home and as a house cleaner. For several families, the most interesting piece of information was that Carmen was enrolled in a part-time nursing program at the local community college. She'd been taking classes for 2 years, maintaining a 3.8 GPA despite working full-time and raising 2 children alone. David continued reading. The family had been living at Riverside Apartments for 18 months. Before that, they'd moved 3 times in 2 years, always staying within the same school district so the girls wouldn't have to change schools. Carmen was currently 3 months behind on rent, but she had a payment plan worked out with the landlord. The twins, Luna and Stella, were both excellent students. They participated in the school's free lunch program and attended after-school tutoring sessions. Their teachers described them as bright, helpful, and mature for their age. There was a note about their father, Roberto, who had left the family 2 years earlier. No forwarding address, no child support payments. Carmen had filed the necessary legal paperwork but had never pursued aggressive collection efforts. David closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. The picture that emerged was of a hardworking mother doing everything she could to build a better life for her children. Carmen wasn't looking for handouts or shortcuts. She was investing in her education, working steadily, and raising 2 remarkable daughters. That evening, David drove past the hospital during the shift change. He saw Carmen walking out of the building with a group of other workers. Even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion in her posture. She climbed onto a bus that would take her home, probably to grab a few hours of sleep before her next shift or her night classes over the next week. David made it his business to learn more about the neighborhood. He visited Rosa's bakery several more times, chatting with Mr. Rodriguez about the community. He learned that many families were struggling with the same issues, working multiple jobs but still falling behind on bills, parents going without so their children could eat, kids like Luna and Stella who were growing up too fast because circumstances demanded it. David also discovered something else. The community was incredibly tight-knit and supportive. When Mrs. Chen at the grocery store had been sick with the flu, other families had taken turns helping her with the store. When Mr. Garcia's repair shop had been broken into, neighbors had donated tools and money to help him get back on his feet. These weren't people looking for charity. They were people who believed in hard work and taking care of each other. Any help would need to be offered in a way that respected their dignity and their values. David spent hours in his home office, staring out at the bay and thinking he'd solved complex business problems before, but this felt more important than any corporate deal he'd ever negotiated. This was about real lives and real futures. He thought about his own journey from a working-class kid to a billionaire, the scholarship that had made college possible, the mentor who had believed in him, the opportunities that had opened doors he never knew existed. Carmen was already doing everything right, working hard, going to school, raising her children. Well, she just needed the same kind of opportunities he'd been given. David picked up his phone and called Rebecca again. "I need you to research something else," he said. "I want to know about accelerated nursing programs in the area, the best ones with the highest job placement rates. And I want to know about community development projects that have worked in similar neighborhoods." As he hung up the phone, David realized that everything was about to change, not just for Luna and Stella and their mother, but for the entire community. He was about to make an investment that couldn't be measured in stock prices or quarterly reports. He was about to invest in hope. David couldn't get those two little girls out of his head. All through his board meeting that afternoon, he kept thinking about Luna and Stella clutching that loaf of bread like it was made of gold. When his business partner asked him a question about quarterly projections, David had to ask him to repeat it twice. That night, David sat in his home office looking out at the San Francisco Bay. The lights of the city sparkled below, and he wondered how many families were going to bed hungry tonight. How many children were lying awake with empty stomachs, trying not to think about food. He'd written plenty of checks to charity over the years. Food banks, homeless shelters, education programs. But this felt different. This wasn't about writing a check and moving on. Something about seeing those girls face to face had gotten under his skin. The next morning, David made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of going straight to his office, he drove back to that neighborhood in Oakland. He parked his car a few blocks away from the bakery and decided to take a walk. The morning was crisp and clear, and the streets were busy with people heading to work. David noticed things he'd missed the day before. The way neighbors called out greetings to each other. The small businesses that lined the main street, a laundromat, a grocery store, a barber shop, a tax preparation office. This wasn't just a place where people lived. This was a real community. He walked slowly, trying to blend in with the other pedestrians. About 2 blocks from the bakery, he spotted them. Luna and Stella were walking hand in hand toward what looked like an elementary school. They were moving carefully, not running and playing like most kids their age. They seemed older somehow, more serious. David kept his distance, not wanting to seem like he was following them. But he was curious. He wanted to understand their world better. The school was a typical public elementary school, brick building. Chain-link fence around the playground, yellow buses lined up outside. David watched from across the street as the twins joined a group of other children waiting for the first bell. Even from far away, David could see that Luna and Stella fit in well with their classmates. They laughed and talked, looking like any other 8-year-old girls. But he noticed something else. During snack time, when other kids pulled out juice boxes and crackers from their backpacks, the twins just watched. David felt a knot form in his stomach. He'd been poor as a kid, but he'd never gone hungry. His parents had always managed to put food on the table, even if it was just rice and beans some nights after school. David positioned himself at a small coffee shop where he could see the street. He ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window, pretending to read emails on his phone while he waited. At 3:15, the school doors opened and children poured out. David spotted the twins easily. They were among the last to leave, probably because they'd been helping their teacher clean up. They started walking down the street, but instead of heading straight home, they made several stops. Their first stop was at Chun's Market, a small grocery store on the corner. David watched through the window as an elderly Chinese woman greeted the girls with obvious affection. Luna and Stella immediately got to work, stacking cans on shelves and organizing produce. The woman, Mrs. Chun, David assumed, watched them with a smile, occasionally giving them directions or showing them how to arrange items. After about 20 minutes, Mrs. Chun reached into a bag behind the counter and handed each girl what looked like an apple and a small package of crackers. The twins thanked her politely, gave her quick hugs, and continued on their way. David's heart ached as he realized what was happening. These children weren't just walking home from school. They were working for their food, earning small meals by helping local business owners. The twins' next stop was at Garcia's Auto Repair. The garage door was open, and David could see an older man working under the hood of a beat-up sedan. Luna and Stella approached him, and he immediately put down his tools to greet them. For the next 15 minutes, David watched the girls sweep the entrance to the garage and organize tools on a workbench. They worked efficiently, like they'd done this many times before. Mr. Garcia supervised their work, occasionally showing them the proper way to arrange something or explaining what a particular tool was used for. When they finished, he disappeared into a small office and returned with 2 small bags. David could see the girls' faces light up as they accepted whatever he'd given them. More snacks, probably. Maybe sandwiches. David found himself blinking back tears. These weren't lazy kids looking for handouts. They were working hard for every bit of food they received. And the adults in their community were clearly looking out for them, providing work that let them earn their meals with dignity. The twins made 2 more stops before heading home. At the laundromat, they helped an elderly woman fold clothes and received what looked like a small bag of cookies. At the barber shop, they swept hair from the floor and cleaned mirrors in exchange for fruit and milk. By the time Luna and Stella reached their apartment building, they were carrying several small bags of food. David realized that this was probably how they survived most days, not through charity, but through work and the kindness of their neighbors. The apartment building where they lived was called Riverside Apartments. It was a 3-story brick building that had seen better days. The paint was peeling and some of the windows were covered with plastic instead of glass. But someone had planted flowers in the small garden out front, and children's toys scattered around the entrance suggested it was home to several young families. David sat in his car for a long time after the twins disappeared into the building. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Rebecca. "I need you to help me with something," he said. "But I need it done very carefully and respectfully." Rebecca had worked with David for 12 years. She knew that tone in his voice. "What do you need?" "There's a family I'm interested in helping. A mother named Carmen and her twin daughters, Luna and Stella. They live at Riverside Apartments in Oakland. I want to know more about their situation, but I want the information gathered through proper channels only. Nothing invasive, nothing that would make them uncomfortable." "I understand," Rebecca said. "What specifically are you looking for?" "I want to know about their mother's work situation, her education, their living circumstances. But only information that's publicly available or that I could learn through legitimate means." "I'll be careful," Rebecca promised. "Should I ask why you're interested?" David smiled. Rebecca always asked the right questions. "Let's just say I'm considering an investment in their future." 3 days later, Rebecca handed David a folder. "The information you requested," she said. "And David, I hope you're planning something wonderful for this family. Their story broke my heart." David opened the folder and began reading. Carmen Rodriguez worked as a night shift cleaner at Oakland General Hospital. She'd been there for 3 years with perfect attendance and glowing reviews from her supervisors. Before that, she'd worked at a nursing home and cleaned houses for several families. The most interesting piece of information was that Carmen was enrolled in a part-time nursing program at Oakland Community College. She'd been taking classes for 2 years, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working full-time and raising 2 children alone. David continued reading. The family had been living at Riverside Apartments for 18 months. Before that, they'd moved 3 times in 2 years, always staying within the same school district so the girls wouldn't have to change schools. Carmen was currently 3 months behind on rent, but she had worked out a payment plan with the landlord. The twins were both excellent students. They participated in the school's free lunch program and attended after-school tutoring sessions. Their teachers described them as bright, helpful, and mature beyond their years. There was a brief note about their father, Roberto, who had left the family 2 years earlier. No forwarding address, no child support payments. Carmen had filed the necessary legal paperwork but had never pursued aggressive collection efforts. David closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. The picture that emerged was of a hardworking mother doing everything possible to build a better life for her children. Carmen wasn't looking for handouts. She was investing in her education, working steadily, and raising 2 remarkable daughters. That evening, David drove past the hospital during the shift change. He saw Carmen walking out of the building with a group of other workers. Even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion in her posture. She climbed onto a bus that would take her home, probably to grab a few hours of sleep before her next shift or her night classes. David realized that Carmen was already doing everything right. She just needed the same kind of opportunities he'd been given as a young man, and he was beginning to form a plan that would change everything for her family. 6 months had passed since David first heard those 2 little girls asking for bread on credit. Now, as he stood watching the construction crew put the finishing touches on Rosa's bakery expansion, he couldn't help but smile. The transformation had been incredible, but the real magic was happening in the lives of the people he'd met that day. The bakery renovation had taken 4 months to complete. What had once been a simple neighborhood bakery was now a beautiful community center with the bakery at its heart. The original space had been doubled in size, with large windows that let in natural light and comfortable seating areas where people could gather, but the most important addition was the community kitchen in the back, where cooking classes were held 3 times a week. There was also a small meeting room for job training workshops and a corner with computers where people could search for jobs or help their kids with homework. David had been careful to make sure Mr. Rodriguez remained the heart and soul of the operation. The older man now employed 6 people from the neighborhood, including 3 single mothers who had been struggling to find work that fit around their children's schedules. The sliding scale payment system had been a huge success. Customers could pay what they could afford, and no one was turned away for lack of money. A simple card system ensured privacy. People just showed their card and paid their designated amount. No one knew who was paying full price and who was paying less, but the biggest transformation was in Carmen's life. 3 months ago, she had been offered a position as community outreach coordinator for the bakery expansion project. The job paid twice what she had been making at the hospital, with regular daytime hours and benefits that included health insurance for her and the girls. Carmen had been suspicious at first. "Why me?" she had asked when David's foundation representative had offered her the position. "I don't have experience with this kind of work." The representative, a kind woman named Patricia, had smiled. "You know this community better than anyone. You've been helping your neighbors for years, even when you barely had enough for yourself. That's exactly the kind of experience we need." "What?" Carmen didn't know was that David had been watching her for months. Not in a creepy way, but in the way someone watches a person they deeply admire. He had seen her volunteer at the school even after working all night. He had watched her help elderly neighbors with their groceries. He had learned about the small loan fund she had started with other mothers in her building, where they pooled their resources to help each other through tough times. Carmen had proven to be amazing at her new job. She organized cooking classes that taught families how to make healthy meals on a budget. She connected people with job training programs and helped them fill out applications. She even started a small childcare program so parents could attend evening classes without worrying about their kids. The twins, Luna and Stella, were thriving too. With their mother's new steady income, they no longer had to work for food after school. Instead, they joined the after-school program at the community center, where they helped younger children with homework and participated in art classes. David often visited the bakery, always careful to blend in as just another customer. He loved watching the girls help serve food during the community dinners that happened every Friday night. They had grown more confident over the past few months, their smiles brighter and their laughter more frequent. One evening, David was sitting in the bakery's seating area, pretending to read while actually watching Carmen lead a resume writing workshop. She was patient and encouraging, helping a young man describe his skills in a way that sounded professional. "You've been working construction for 5 years," Carmen was saying. "That means you're reliable, you can work as part of a team, and you have experience with tools and safety procedures. Those are valuable skills." The young man nodded, looking more hopeful than he had when he'd arrived. "I never thought about it that way," he said. David felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. Carmen wasn't just doing a job, she was changing lives. After the workshop ended, David approached the counter where Mr. Rodriguez was cleaning up for the night. "How's business?" David asked casually. Mr. Rodriguez beamed. "Better than ever. But more than that, we're doing something important here. You see that woman over there?" He nodded toward Carmen, who was helping people pack up their materials. "She's turned this place into the heart of the neighborhood. People come here not just for bread, but for hope." David nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. "She seems like a special person." "She is," Mr. Rodriguez said. "You know, she's going to nursing school too. Takes classes 3 nights a week at the community college. I don't know how she does it all, but she never complains." What Mr. Rodriguez didn't know was that Carmen's nursing education had also been part of David's plan. Through his foundation, he had arranged for her to receive a merit scholarship to an accelerated nursing program at a prestigious university. The scholarship covered not just tuition, but also childcare and transportation costs. Carmen had been amazed when she received the notification. "I can't believe they chose me," she had told her daughters. "There must have been hundreds of applicants." The truth was, there had been hundreds of applicants, but David had made sure Carmen's application stood out. Not through any dishonest means, but by ensuring that her incredible GPA, her community volunteer work, and her determination were properly highlighted. Now, Carmen was just 6 months away from graduating with her nursing degree. She had already been offered a position at the Children's Hospital where she would be working day shifts and making more money than she had ever dreamed possible. David often thought about the ripple effects of his intervention. The bakery expansion had created jobs for 12 people. The community programs had helped over 50 families find better employment or access to education. The small business loan program had helped 7 entrepreneurs start their own ventures. But the most important transformation was in the twins themselves. Luna and Stella had gone from being children who worried about their next meal to confident young girls who were excelling in school and helping other kids in their community. Last week, David had overheard them talking to some younger children during the after-school program. "Don't worry if your family doesn't have much money," Luna was saying to a little boy who looked sad. "There are lots of people who want to help. You just have to work hard and be kind to others. And never give up," Stella added. "Our mama always says that good things happen to people who don't give up." David had to step outside to compose himself. These girls who had once begged for bread on credit were now teaching other children about hope and perseverance. The neighborhood had changed too. Property values had started to rise, but not in a way that pushed out long-term residents. Instead, the area was attracting young families and professionals who wanted to be part of a strong community. David's favorite time to visit the bakery was during the Friday evening community dinners. Families from all over the neighborhood would gather to share a meal and catch up on each other's lives. Children played together while adults discussed everything from school board elections to gardening tips. Carmen usually stood at the front of the room during these dinners, making announcements about upcoming programs or celebrating community achievements. She had become a natural leader, respected by everyone who knew her. Next week, we're starting a new job training program for healthcare workers, she had announced at last Friday's dinner. And I'm happy to report that 5 of our neighbors have gotten new jobs in the past month. The room had erupted in applause, and David had felt that familiar warmth in his chest. This was what success really looked like, not stock prices or quarterly reports, but real people living better lives. As David drove home that night, he realized that his investment in this community had paid dividends he never could have anticipated. He had set out to help one family, but he had ended up helping an entire neighborhood discover its own strength and potential. The transformation was complete, but David knew this was just the beginning. The foundation he had built here would continue to grow and change lives for years to come. 2 years had passed since David first heard Luna and Stella asking for bread on credit. Now, as he sat in the audience at Oakland Community College's graduation ceremony, he felt his heart racing with anticipation. Carmen was about to graduate with her nursing degree, and today was the day he had decided to finally reveal his secret. The auditorium was packed with families, celebrating their loved ones' achievements. David had chosen a seat in the middle section, close enough to see Carmen clearly, but not so close that he would draw attention to himself. He spotted the twins in the front row, both wearing their best dresses and holding handmade signs that read, "We're proud of you, Mama." Luna and Stella were now 10 years old, and the transformation in them was remarkable. They no longer had the worried expressions he remembered from that first day at the bakery. Instead, they sat up straight with confidence, their faces glowing with pride as they waited for their mother's name to be called. The ceremony began with the usual speeches from college officials and guest speakers. David barely heard the words. His mind was focused on the moment that was coming, the moment when he would finally meet the family that had changed his life as much as he had changed theirs. "Carmen Rodriguez?" the announcer called out. David watched as Carmen walked across the stage in her cap and gown. She was beaming, and when she shook hands with the college president, David could see tears of joy in her eyes. The twins jumped to their feet, cheering loudly and waving their signs. Carmen had finished her nursing degree with a perfect 4.0 GPA while working full-time at the community center and raising 2 daughters. She had been accepted to work at Oakland Children's Hospital, where she would be making more money than she had ever dreamed possible. After the ceremony, families gathered outside for photos and celebrations. David watched from a distance as Carmen hugged her daughters and posed for pictures with her classmates. Mr. Rodriguez from the bakery was there, along with Mrs. Chun from the grocery store and several other neighbors who had become like family. To them, David took a deep breath and walked over to where Carmen was standing with her daughters. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you Carmen Rodriguez?" Carmen turned to face him, her expression friendly but curious. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "My name is David Chun," he said, extending his hand. "I wanted to congratulate you on your graduation. I've heard wonderful things about your work in the community." Carmen shook his hand, still looking puzzled. "Thank you. That's very kind." "Are you from the hospital?" David smiled. "No, actually. I'm here because I wanted to meet you and your daughters. You see, I've been watching your family for the past 2 years, and I've been amazed by your strength and determination." Luna and Stella moved closer to their mother, their eyes wide with curiosity. Carmen's expression became slightly guarded. "I'm not sure I understand," she said carefully. 2 years ago, David continued, I was outside Rosa's bakery when I overheard Two little girls asking Mr. Rodriguez for bread on credit. Those girls were Luna and Stella. The twins gasped, looking at each other with surprise. Carmen's eyes widened as she tried to process what David was saying. I don't understand, Carmen said slowly. You were there that day? I was, David nodded. And what I saw that day changed my life? I saw two brave little girls who were willing to work for food rather than simply ask for charity. I saw children who treated a loaf of bread like it was made of gold because they understood its value. Carmen's hand went to her chest. You were the man in the suit, she whispered. I remember seeing someone outside the bakery that day. That's right, David said. What I didn't tell you is who I am. I'm the CEO of Tech Forward Solutions. You might have heard of us, Carmen's jaw dropped. Tech Forward was one of the biggest technology companies in the world. Everyone in the Bay Area knew the name. You single quotes read ... She started, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I'm a billionaire, David said simply. But more importantly, I'm someone who was deeply moved by your family's story. So I decided to do something about it. Luna grabbed her mother's hand. Mama, what does he mean? Carmen was staring at David with a mixture of confusion and growing realization. The community center job, she said slowly. The scholarship for nursing school, the bakery expansion, that was all you. David nodded. My foundation organized all of it. But I want you to understand something very important. I didn't give you anything you didn't earn. The job at the community center? You were hired because you're incredibly good at helping people. The scholarship? You earned that with your perfect grades and your volunteer work. Everything that's happened to your family has happened because you worked for it. Tears were streaming down Carmen's face now. I don't understand, she said. Why would you do this for us? We're strangers. Because, David said, his own voice thick with emotion, watching your family taught me something I had forgotten. Success isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you treat other people, especially when you have very little to give. He knelt down so he was at eye level with Luna and Stella. Do you girls remember that day at the bakery? When you asked Mr. Rodriguez for bread? They nodded solemnly. Do you remember what you offered to do in exchange for that bread? We said we would work, Luna said quietly. That's right. You didn't just ask for free food. You offered to work for it. You wanted to earn it. That showed me that you understood something very important about dignity and self-respect. David stood up and looked at Carmen again. Your daughters weren't just asking for bread that day. They were showing me what real character looks like. And you, Carmen? You've spent the last 2 years proving that you're exactly the kind of person who deserves every opportunity you've been given. Carmen was crying openly now. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Don't say anything, David said gently. Just keep being the amazing mother and community leader you've always been. But why didn't you tell us sooner? Stella asked. Why did you keep it a secret? David smiled at her. Because I wanted to make sure you knew that everything good that happened to your family was because of your own hard work, not because someone felt sorry for you. You earned every single thing you have. Mr. Rodriguez, who had been standing nearby and overheard the conversation, walked over with tears in his eyes. David, he said, you've been coming to my bakery for 2 years. You've been watching over this family like a guardian angel. We all have, David said. The whole community has been watching over each other. That's what makes this neighborhood so special. Carmen wiped her eyes and looked at David with an expression of deep gratitude. You gave us more than money, she said. You gave us hope. You gave us a chance to believe in ourselves again. No, David said firmly. You gave that to yourselves. I just provided some opportunities. Everything else came from your own strength and determination. Luna and Stella looked at each other, then at David. Can we hug you? Luna asked Dot. David felt his eyes fill with tears. I would love that, he said Dot, as the two girls wrapped their arms around him. David realized that this moment was worth more than every dollar he had ever made. He had set out to help one family, but they had ended up helping him remember what was truly important in life. There's one more thing, David. said as the girl stepped back. "I'm starting a new foundation called the Luna and Stella Foundation. It's going to help single mothers pursue their education and career goals. And I'd like you, Carmen, to be the director." Carmen's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just starting my nursing career." "You're not just a nurse," David said. "You're a leader. You've proven that over the past 2 years. The foundation needs someone who understands what it's like to struggle, someone who knows how to help people while preserving their dignity." As the sun set over the college campus, the group stood, together talking about plans for the future. David knew that this was just the beginning. The Luna and Stella Foundation would help hundreds of families, and the community center would continue to grow and change lives, but most importantly, 2 little girls who had once begged for bread. Uncredit now knew that they could achieve anything they set their minds to. And that, David realized, was the most incredible investment he had ever made.